Hello and welcome to Real Time Recorded. This is Dave Michaels. I'm with Zeus Karavala. Hello, Zeus.
Hey, Dave. It's nice to be back.
And this week we'll be talking about week 44 of 2020, probably the worst years I could recall. But anyway, week 44 wasn't so bad as things go. Let's go ahead and start off with the Mitel. Mitel had their summit this week.
They did.
It was like a 3-day or 3.5-day summit. It was actually pretty well filled out, back-to-back sessions on all the products. We got to hear the keynotes. It was actually I think the second time we've heard from Mary. Mary became the CEO at Mitel about a year ago. And it's the second time she met with analysts. It was actually really nice to hear from her. And one of the things that, when new leaders come in, of course, they change all the leaders and all the managers. So that's happened. But other thing that happens is they blame the previous management for everything that happened. And I didn't hear any of that, Zeus. I heard a lot of, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing. And it was actually, Mary's just so disarming in the way she presents things. So because the story sounded great when she told it, but as I processed it later, I realized that the story was a little harsher than the way she presented it, which essentially was that, holy crap, things are messed up here at Mitel. But she never actually said that. Mitel has had a long stretch of acquisitions. They put up a slide showing it's been going on since 2003. And at least in the last 5-6 years or so, that strategy has been, let's acquire whatever's on sale. And so they've bought a lot of brands, a lot of base, and a lot of technical debt, effectively. And so I think this past year, Mitel's been scratching their head, or maybe more accurately, bailing water, realizing they had some problems, a lot of leaks in their boat as they tried to update a lot of their platforms. They had a lot of problems with their cloud services. They had a lot of disconnects between their products, but it sounds like that's mostly behind them now. They've reached a fairly reliable state, 4 nines on their UCaaS Connect service. They're speaking very confidently about where they are with video and where they are with messaging, and they've really put together a pretty clear strategy, which specifically, or I should say vision, specifically is to leverage their base to be a global mid-market cloud communications leader. Now, that's not particularly new, but what's new is their focus and disciplined approach, which is very clearly around modernizing, which I just kind of talked about, updating a lot of their infrastructure. Very strong focus on their applications, and they're making their applications work across all their platforms and devices, or making their devices work across all their platforms as well, particularly the 6900 series IP phones. And they're very focused on managing their base, of not only their customer base, but their partner base, and making sure that their partners can make the migration as well as their customers can. And they're very detailed, disciplined, I would say, data-driven approach to how they're doing this. And then the final point that I think is really important is that they are also expanding their routes to market. What did you get out of that, Zeus?
Yeah, well, first of all, I do think the acquisition strategy that the former CEO had, Rich McBee, did create kind of a messy company. But I think realistically, would we even be talking about Mitel if they hadn't have done that? In the UC space, you do need some size, and the roll up of all those companies gave them some size and some heft, which gave them some global relevance, frankly. And they have some good customers now, including Major League Baseball, right? So that their customer base is good. I think what they got with ShoreTel, that acquisition, was a UCaaS platform, but it was really a version 1.0 of UCaaS, where you just basically took your PBX and you put it in the cloud. And that wasn't really a cloud native platform like it is today. So they've had to go through the work the last few years of rebuilding that and making it microservices based, making it cloud native, and now it's finally ready to scale and become a true multi-tenant platform, because it really wasn't that before. I do think the vision of trying to be the mid-market cloud communication leader is the right one for them. Although the mid-market is tough. Small businesses have a very specific need. They want easy to deploy. You typically don't have an IT person doing it. Large enterprise, very complicated deployments, a lot of customability. And then the mid-market is kind of a mix of both of those things, right? So servicing the needs of the mid-market is tough. And I think trying to balance a portfolio that's both on-prem, private cloud, public cloud, that requires a lot of work. And so we'll see if they can do that. Like I said, I think it's the right vision for them. They're working off a common code base now, which makes it easier. Those customers, like I said, we talked about, when we're prepping for this, tend to be fairly complicated. So the portfolio of things they have is pretty complicated as well. So I think it's the right strategy for them today. Now it's time for them to execute. And that's one thing Mary is really good at, is you look at her history of execution, it's been strong. All right, well, this week also was Cisco's Partner Summit. And while this is a reseller-focused event, Cisco always does introduce a whole bunch of new products to that. And the collaboration portfolio, they also had some new things come out. I think the highlights, the two products, I guess, that highlighted the collab updates was a product called Legislate and another one called Connected Justice. And think of these both, Dave, as almost custom versions of WebEx for specific workflows. So the way Legislate works, you think of legislatures, they would never have met virtually pre-COVID, but now they do. And so you need things like breakout rooms that are simple to go into for people to go talk about certain topics. So you need the ability to vote within it, right? To be able to give the people on the legislature floor the ability to vote on bills and things like that. Connected Justice is actually meant for the legal system to use. So the legal industries had to move courtrooms and things like that to virtual systems as well. And in both cases with Legislate and Connected Justice, I think these are things that the organizations could have done with a lot of heavy lifting, but what Cisco did was they packaged them in a way to make the products usable for those specific verticals. And I think this is actually a shape of things to come with communications. I think there's a lot of industries in which the tool itself doesn't quite work from a workflow perspective. I was talking to a school teacher about this, where students go onto WebEx or Zoom or whatever, and they pin their friend instead of the teacher. Well, that should be a case where, from a workflow perspective, if you're designated the teacher, you should be automatically pinned. And I think we talked about this last week with Zoomtopia, that more and more of these companies and Cisco's been doing this for a while, trying to move to a platform. I think a lot of these vertical use cases get driven through ISVs because that's how you scale it. You think of even the Legislate one, the way the US government does Congress is different than the way the Canadian government runs their parliament, which is different than the way, say, the Irish government might do theirs. And so it's unrealistic for a company like Cisco to be able to do all those different things. And so I think the platform approach here really will allow us to take what was a standardized set of tools and verticalize them. The other really interesting news I thought was something called WebEx Connect. And WebEx already had the ability for you to connect into mid-mile providers like an Equinix and stuff to improve the bandwidth. But now using SD-WAN, an enterprise can connect directly into the WebEx cloud, so thereby getting rid of the internet uncertainty from that. So those were just some of the announcements. There's a whole bunch of other things they announced from the WebEx side, but these are things I think, even though it was a partner event, customers would be interested in.
Yeah, you're not kidding about the number of things they announced. And that was just this week. They also did a pretty big drop of news on October 3rd, the beginning of the month. And I tracked this stuff because I documented in my newsletter, and I just finished my newsletter for September, and then October 3rd they announced all these new things. Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, there goes the October newsletter. And then at October 29th, they announced a whole bunch of more. So the rate of innovation is really picking up at Cisco, and I think that's an important point. The first half of the year, they and most meetings companies were inundated with the pandemic and trying to keep up with unprecedented demand and scale and operations. And so, right, so we saw them kind of shift into that. And now we had Zoomtopia recently. We've got Cisco picking up. Now these companies are putting all their efforts into their innovation cycle again. And so Cisco did 2 big drops this month, and I think that's going to be the new normal. As they focus more on features. You just talked about how the Legislate being a vertical. I think everything's a vertical now, right? I just wrote a post on No Jitter about virtual conferences. That's a new vertical. Medicine's a new vertical. Education's a vertical you touched on, and they just launched WebEx Classrooms. Everything's a vertical now in meetings technology. So we're going to see a ton of that. And Cisco's also going to start acting a little more quicker because they've really consolidated some things internally. They've taken their teams and their meetings and their Jabber clients and organizationally put them under one organization, but they're also technically putting these all into one technology stack that allows them to move a little faster. They've done the same thing with their hardware, with the basically a single client, and they've got single devices all coming together as well too. So I think we're going to see a much faster velocity coming out of Cisco, build once, leverage many times. And I also think that there's going to be some more acquisitions coming. Cisco is so top secret about acquisitions, so I don't have any details here, but I get the sense that some acquisitions are in the works.
Well, I'm predicting that in December at the WebEx1 event, we will see a feature release that's greater than anything we've seen this year.
So Zeus, there's a lot of stuff going on this week. You had Ring Central do a drop on meetings. You had Avaya release their Vantage 3. You've got Microsoft release their personal productivity tools. You've got Five9 acquiring Inference. Which one do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about Five9 and Inference. I think that's an interesting acquisition. First of all, they announced it on their quarterly call, and like they have done in the past, 16 quarters was another beat and raise. So clearly the CCaaS market's moving forward. I think for Five9, they've been talking a lot about the AIization, I guess, of their product and bringing more and more AI and ML capabilities in. What Inference is, it's a set of virtual agents that companies can deploy to almost replace a person, but it's if you were to call and you wouldn't even know it's a virtual agent. I think this helps them up market with large enterprises looking to digitize their contact centers, but also cut down on the human labor costs. And Rowan's talked a lot about that, actually, the total market. He throws around a TAM of $24 billion for CCaaS, which is really the number of agents times the average revenue per seat. But the market's actually much bigger than that if you take into the reduction of people, the shifting to virtual. And for instance, their ASPs right now are about $200 per agent per seat, which is on the high end of the enterprise. These virtual agents cost about $400 per month from an ASP perspective, which may seem high because it's twice as much as what you'd pay for an agent. But when you factor in the cost of a person, it's actually much lower, right? So I think virtual agents aren't going to wholly replace people, but I do think that they complement them nicely and do a lot of the mundane things, like how do I reset my passwords and things like that people don't want to do. It allows the traditional agent to be more valuable, but also brings the cost down, and frankly brings Five9's revenue per client up. And so I think what we're going to see over the next couple of years is the average revenue per seat on CCaaS continue to rise because of the influence of AI.
Yep. It's a really interesting acquisition, and it's the third acquisition that Five9 has made since Rowan has been there. He got there about, I think, June, about halfway through 2018. And just looking at it, their stock has gone up about 300% since he arrived. So yeah. I guess he's making some smart acquisitions. The first one was Virtual Observer, then came Windu. This is by far the biggest acquisition they've made. And that's one of the joys of having your stock go up like that, right? You can make richer acquisitions. It's also fairly standard. Rowan likes to acquire. We saw that happen a lot at Cisco. But he follows a very clear MO at Five9, where he basically partners with these companies first, then they launch a joint product and get some joint customers, and then the acquisition. So that happened like clockwork with Inference. In fact, they launched it was just in September. They launched their new IVA, their new with Google CCAI, and Jonathan made a big deal about how they had made that Google CCAI solution better with Inference, and so they were pretty proud of that. That was part of their magic, and now it really is part of their magic. So to your point about IVAs, interactive voice agents, is that right? Interactive voice agents, or I think that's right. They're basically the new IVR, and they're going to be in all the contact centers. But they're not limited to contact centers. They're going to be everywhere. Inference already sells them to a lot of UC type of cases, just not even anything to do with a contact center. It's also got a strong alignment with Five9 because Jonathan there has really been preaching about practical and accessible AI, and this falls into that category because it's fairly simple to implement. They could often get these IVAs up in hours or weeks, depending who you talk to. And it also opens up new distribution for Five9. Inference had a lot of customers already. Like, AT&T is a joint customer of Five9 and Inference, but a lot of BroadSoft customers have it, and it'll be an interesting new channel for Five9 that they haven't had before.
So that's it for week 44. It was a busy week. I expect nothing less out of this industry now, Dave. So on behalf of Dave Michaels and myself, thanks for joining us on Real Time Report.